Sail to Win is brought to you in part by Sperry Topsider, committed to making quality footwear since 1935, a division of the Stride Rite Corporation.
For the person who doesn't sense an emotion toward boats, it may be hard to understand how an inanimate object of lead, wood, metal, or fiber can be such an object of love and admiration. However, for enthusiasts, there is an unmistakable emotional tie.
On the morning of January 4, 1905, a prototype was launched, and Captain Nat wrote the New York Yacht Club. By the time we got underway, there wasn't a ripple on the water, and ice had formed. But the boat moved off nicely. They should prove good sailors in light air.
It's a unique and spectacular lineup. 136 ocean cruisers all under sail, ready for the off.
I think the German boat's up there, son.
That's a German boat?
No, I think he's ahead of us, but we'll catch him. Wait till we get to the trade wind.
I'm Walter Cronkite. In this three-part series, we will look at the people, boats, and races which have made maritime history and show the extraordinary lengths to which sailors have gone in their effort to sail to win. For a number of years, I've been associated with Mystic Seaport and its work to preserve our maritime history. In our first episode, we look at a fascinating piece of that collection in a film on a class of boats called the New York 30s and the restoration of one boat, the Ibis. This outstanding sailboat was built almost 90 years ago and designed by Nathaniel Herreshoff, a leader and innovator in all areas of maritime design. In all, 18 of the New York 30s were built in those early days of the 20th century. Episode 2 brings us to 1968 and the creation of Windward Passage, the dream of Bob Johnson and the design of Alan Gurney. Here was a boat built for speed. The domination of Windward Passage on the race course has made this ocean racer a legend. Passage's record-breaking run in the 1971 Miami-Montego Bay race is just one of many victories. In the ARC, Episode 3, you will take part in the adventure of three families as they race from the Canary Islands to Barbados in the Atlantic Rally for Cruisers. And now, with the support of Mystic Seaport Film and Video Archives, we present Authentic New York 30s.
Tail over. Let it go, David. It looked like the most prettiest boat I've ever seen. I said, someday I'm going to own this boat. You take a 16-year-old kid who's supporting his mother, where the hell does he get the nerve to say, I'm going to own the boat? But I'm a very religious man. She was stripped, wrecked, sunk. Okay, now he's the main. He's the main. And 12 years or 14 years later, I owned the boat, even though I didn't know it was the same boat when I bought it. Come on, Ibis. Sweet, lovable bitch.
The year 1904, and America had grand plans. The workday started at 7 in the morning and ran to 5 in the evening. income tax was 11 years away. Teddy Roosevelt was the president, and digging began on the Panama Canal. At home, yachting was in its heyday. As the largest cup defender ever, the Reliance had just defeated the British challenger Shamrock III. But there was unrest at the New York Yacht Club. The young members wanted a light, one-design boat for their own racing pleasure. Small-day sailors of about 43 feet overall length, not less than 30 feet at the waterline. A committee was formed and chose a design submitted by the man who had built the Reliance, the brilliant Nathaniel Herreshoff. Captain Nat and his blind brother J.B. ran the world's finest boat shop in Bristol, Rhode Island.
Well, the Herreshoffs built every cup defender, 8 in a row, from 1893 to 1934. And my grandfather, Captain Nat, actually sailed on all 6 of his own cup defenses, that is, of the boats that he designed, going from the Vigilant in 1893 through the Resolute in 1920. So he's probably sailed in more America's Cup races than anybody else.
On November 5, 1904, the Herreshoff signed a contract to build 8 boats based upon sketches. The final design existed only in Captain Nat's head.
My grandfather had a most unusual way to design the boats. Like anybody else, he would start with a conception and a basic design, but the thing that he did differently was that in designing the hull, instead of making a series of one-dimensional views which combined to a three-dimensional shape, he immediately constructed a half model. He carved it out of white pine wood, and it was the carving of this model that established the exact shape of the model, translated the ideas he had in his mind into something real, and then measurements were made from the model, and that became the shape of the boat.
On the morning of January 4, 1905, a prototype was launched, and Captain Nat wrote the New York Yacht Club. By the time we got underway, there wasn't a ripple on the water, and ice had formed. But the boat moved off nicely. They should prove good sailors in light air. The testing ended abruptly when Captain Nat got a crick in his neck and went home to bed with lumbago. The Herreshoff set up a carefully planned assembly line to build what had now become a run of 18 boats. The 30s were built side by side at a rate of 1 a week. They were planked upside down with cypress inside and yellow pine set in shellac outside. Each piece was prefabricated. The price, $4,000 paid in 3 installments. Included were racing sails, bedding, a stove, full cooking utensils, china in racks, an egg beater, 2 lemon squeezers, and a can opener.
They were built not necessarily to last these 80 years, but they were built very lightly to sail fast and win races. And I think the fact that they've lasted is a tribute not only to the design, but to the good woods and other materials that went into them, and to the good workmanship, and also to the owners, the owners who preserved them.
Well, the way they were built, most perfect. Look at these bungs. Look, the bungs on this boat. How would anybody do that now? Smooth as glass. Every single thing was perfect. See that? And the workmen, perfect. Nothing was ever turned out that wasn't good. Nothing.
He did honest work. And that's the secret of it.
Well, when my father joined my uncle, it was said that it was agreed that they would not compete with other builders, but would excel, so that, in other words, they were in a class by themselves.
He was an artist. The manufacturing he left to his superintendents and to his brother while he was alive. And his interest was on designing something like this boat here, what he could do and get speed out of it. And the different woods that he would use, he was familiar with, and techniques. And he put it together, and a lot of it is artistry.
Within 3 months, all 18 were completed, and members drew lots just to keep things on the up and up. The first race was held on May 27th with Nautilus number 16 winning. Racing rules limited prize money to $4 for first place, $3 for second, and $2 for third. Karamia took the 1905 season's championship with Ibis finishing 7th. And for the next 2 decades, the elegant gaff-rigged 30s continue to be the racing class in New York Yacht Club events.
I understand that the 30 feet at the waterline was chosen because there's an old rumor that was what the smallest boat you could own and still be a member.
Well, that's probably about right. We have a boat in the collection of the Herreshoff Marine Museum that's even a little bit bigger than that, which is named Trivia. And she was given to Harold Vanderbilt when he graduated from high school, and I think the name Trivia was because this yacht of only some 48 feet was considered very small and almost trivial. So what you say is true.
As the years went by, other one-design classes sprung up, only to fall from fashion. But the 30s kept going strong. And while the feverish racing competition may have waned a bit, the boats did continue to provide their owners with many a good cruise. If these early home movies taken aboard number 15, the Banzai, are any indication. Not all of the 30s met with such good fortune. Retired sanitation worker Willie Wolfe tells where he discovered one.
First time I saw the Ibis, she was laying in the mud flats behind Hunter's Island. I used to do service calls in New Rochelle, and I'd seen it on the shore road 3 or 4 times. A friend of mine, Dick Rath, and I discussed it. We went up there one night, put a rowboat in the water and rowed out to it, got the registration numbers off of it. We found out who owned the boat. We went ahead, contacted the person, and after a bottle of whiskey was devoured, we bought the boat for $100.
As luck would have it, the boat turned out to be the very same New York 30 Willie had dreamed of owning as a boy.
The remarkable thing about it is, when I bought the boat in 1957, I didn't even know it was the same boat. The name was changed. There was no rig on it. Everything was painted battleship gray and white. So I do believe in God, because he answered a prayer right then and there. She was built for C. O'Donnell Disland in 1905 originally. The 1907, 1908, she was transferred to J.P. Morgan Jr. And J.P. Morgan had it till, I believe, 1913. Then somewhere in the 20s, a fellow by the name of Maxwell owned it. This was after they removed the first keel on it for the war effort, the First World War. Later on, John Dillette owned the boat, put it on a freighter, shipped it down to Puerto Rico, and he sailed it back home. 1953, I pick up the boat again. She was owned by Morton Engel. And Morton Engel was racing the boat fairly extensively. And in 53, there was Hurricane Carol. She broke her moorings and sunk 90 foot of water in hen and chickens. They raised the boat. Jack Pomeroy bought the boat. He stripped the mainmast out of it, stripped the keel off of it, and left it laying in Jake's boatyard up in Mamaroneck. A fellow by the name of John Corfeld, college student, bought the boat from Jake for $300. Jake says, look, you got 2 weeks to get the boat in the water. Get it out of here. The kid brought it down to the New York Yacht Club. They took one look at it, and they says, we don't want that junk here. So he took it out and anchored it just over and behind Hunter's Island. That's where I seen it with Dick Rath. And then 1 year after the other, we refastened it, put in some more frames, and kept working on the boat. But financially, it became strapping to me, and I just couldn't keep up with it anymore. So I donated to Full Sea.
In 1981, the Ibis passed into the hands of its 12th owner, the Full Sea Marine Preservation Organization, a volunteer program founded by Brooklyn College professor of comparative literature, David Karamidzian.
Well, we started it for a very simple reason. that there were a few boats that we thought ought to be restored, and that we're going to go to hell if somebody didn't take them in under tow. And we thought originally that we would keep it very small. We'd take 2 or 3 boats and restore them and develop some kind of an educational program to go along with it, not only a sailing program, but also an environmental program.
However, grand plans take money, and raising that money isn't easy, as David soon discovered.
David Kiramijan. Did I speak with you about an hour ago? Yeah, I'm sure that's fine. All right, thanks very much. All right, bye-bye. Voila, he's in a meeting.
It took 2 years before David could find a company that shared his commitment to tradition, but raising money turned out to be only the beginning of the struggle.
The organization itself, although it's a sort of a paradox. The organization has been the vehicle for getting a lot of boats back into the water and sailing and so forth. But it's also something that requires a tremendous amount of time and concentration and what have you. So the good old days when I used to own a boat personally, you know, and I could focus on one boat and do it from A to Z, you know, rather orderly fashion. That doesn't seem to be happening here. Because there's organizational problems and, you know, all sorts of things that you have to attend to. You know, people are interested in getting out on what's available and doing some sailing, which is fine. And the, you know, questions about history and the tradition of things and how we got where we are and what the meaning of the tradition is and how the tradition might be staying alive is not of a hell of a lot of importance to many people.
Before putting the Ibis back in the water, naval architect George Stidell was brought in to take a look. George knows a thing or two about the boats. He was born the same year they were built, 1905.
Old Herreshoff boats are less prone to rot than any boat that's ever been built, for one reason. They're well ventilated. For instance, they have no header here to cat trap water. They only have a clamp, no shelf and clamp. The shelf would stick inboard from what you see there, which is the clamp. He's kneed. Now, to get back a little, the strength of a boat is in its fore and aft members. That's what makes them hog, that's what makes them twist. No, you don't need heavy frames. He never put heavy frames in. He did diagonally strap them, but he had knees to tie in the deck. Those are natural knees, growed knees as they call them.
Right.
And I've never, in all my years, I've never seen a truly rotted Herreshoff boat. As far as workmanship like this, forget it. You'd have to go to heaven and bring them all back. The last of the good boat builders was in the early 30s, and they're all dead and gone. Every man I had, including my partner, is dead. So where are you going to learn this stuff? They have little boat shops around. They're reading from books and trying to be boat builders. And it's just, it's nobody's fault. In Europe, the boat builders have gone along. There are still boat builders, and there are apprentices. But here everybody wants to stripe pants, you know, and a desk job.
Well, there's some of that coming back, though, you know. There's
but
a lot
it's
of
too
good
late. You know, like the elm trees, they're gone. Where are you going to get new ones? And first of all, there's no lumber. Go out and try to find caulking irons, bend irons, and corner irons, and things like that, dumb irons, making irons.
It's not easy.
Okay, when you get them, who's going to use them? Who can splice? They splice with a match. And this is quick and easy now. They turn the Tupperware machine, and out comes a boat. Do you want it 10 feet long, or do you want it 40 feet long?
George pronounced the Ibis structurally sound, but urged full sea to get her back in the water as soon as possible.
Good luck, Dave.
Good luck.
I know how you feel. How you feel.
She gave the slings all night. Well,
there's nothing wrong with that.
Because I want the aft strap as far forward as possible. The idea is to pick the lead up right there.
Even though everyone in the yard went out of their way to help the Ibis, Today's modern world has rules, regulations, and schedules that aren't geared for an 80-year-old wooden boat. She cannot be hurried. She needs time to be carefully placed in the water, time for her wood to swell, and the clock is working against her.
Brilliant, brilliant.
What happens at 4:30?
At 4:30, we quit. Unless he wants to pay time and a half, which I don't know. I know he doesn't want to. Anything after 8 hours is overtime.
Today, yes.
Despite the difficult schedule, the decision is made to go ahead and put the Ibis in the water and hope the extra pumps can keep up.
This is something coming.
What's the problem with the line?
David just didn't bring any down. David's coming down now.
We have enough water to float here, don't we now?
Yeah.
Super. We've done it. There it is.
With the Ibis now in the water and her wood beginning to swell, work goes on back at the full sea shop. The house has to be reconstructed from scratch, following Herreshoff's original drawings and using mahogany. Even with the benefit of power tools, the project takes nearly 6 weeks. If Captain Nat made a mistake in designing the 30s, it was in building them with a bowsprit of only 1 foot 3 inches in length. The helmsman used to complain they were tough to handle on a close reach. The problem was quickly remedied by increasing the length to 3 feet 3 inches. The job of cutting the sails is given to Al Larson, a man whose ideas of work seem a little out of place today.
One word, quality. Quality of workmanship and quality of materials. And nowadays everything is mass-produced. They can afford to have maybe 10% of any product they manufacture as being no good. Where in the old days, there wasn't that volume of materials being made, and each one had to be perfect. Otherwise, the fellow didn't stay in business.
This takes about 20 minutes to work a hole like this around. And then after we get all that done, we rope the rope all by hand, every strand. And that takes a long time. Every strand you go through like that.
That's the quality way. That's the way all sails are made. If some of the old timers could get out of the grave now and look at the way sails are made nowadays, I think they'd jump right back in the grave again. But this is the quality way. This is the way New York 30s were built in wood. This is the way sails were made, handwork. That's the best way to do it.
The Ibis hasn't sailed in 5 years. Tomorrow she faces competition once again. A reunion with 2 other 30s at the Seawannica Yacht Club, the site of many a race back in 1905. At 80 years of age, after being stripped, scrapped, sunk, and salvaged, the Ibis, New York 30 #2, proudly sails again with two other originals. Anemone 2, number 18, now named Aquila, and Caramia, now fitted with a modern Marconi rig. And sail she does, for the Ibis is more than some old museum piece dusted off and brought out for a day of fresh air. She's a competitor with a strong breeze and her original powerful gaff rig. The Ibis can still sail with the best of today's high-tech boats. The cost to build a New York 30 like the Ibis from scratch today, if you could find the materials, $270,000.
Take a 16-year-old kid who's supporting his mother. Where the hell does he get the nerve to say, I'm going to own the boat? But I'm a very religious man.
Well, the way they were built, most perfect. Look at these bungs. Look, the bungs on this boat. How would anybody do that now?
Well, they're like the elm trees. They're gone. Where are you going to get new ones?
One word, quality. Quality of workmanship and quality of materials.
That's the way it should be. We've done it. There it is.
What is remarkable about the New York 30 class is the fact that of the 18 built, a number of them are still sailing and winning races today. In almost any wind or sea condition, the New York 30s show the assets of good design and thoughtful construction. It's an inspiration to see how these great boats, nearing 100 years old, are still sailing today, providing recreational fun for their owners and a moment of the past for the viewer.
For the person who doesn't sense an emotion toward boats, it may be hard to understand how an inanimate object of lead, wood, metal, or fiber can be such an object of love and admiration. However, for enthusiasts, there is an unmistakable emotional tie.
On the morning of January 4, 1905, a prototype was launched, and Captain Nat wrote the New York Yacht Club. By the time we got underway, there wasn't a ripple on the water, and ice had formed. With the boat moved off nicely, they should prove good sailors in light air.
It's a unique and spectacular lineup. 136 ocean cruisers all under sail, ready for the off.
Oh, I think the German boat's up there, son.
That's a German boat?
No, I think he's ahead of us, but we'll catch him. Wait till we get to the trade wind.
I'm Walter Cronkite. Windward Passage is the name of a very special record-setting boat. The 73-foot ketch was part of a trend in the late 60s toward lighter-weight ocean and bay racers. Windward Passage was built in 1968, designed by Alan Gurney. Owner Robert F. Johnson built the boat to get to the finish line first and cover the race course in the fastest possible time. Johnson wanted to leave the concern of handicaps and time allowances to other racers. By 1971, Windward Passage had already accomplished a number of significant wins and speed records. Passage sailed that year in the Miami-to-Montego Bay race and achieved a time record still unbroken to this day.
The race organizers proudly welcome Windward Passage to the waters of Jamaica. Already this 3-year-old craft has become a legend, having broken speed records and won dozens of races around the world. Built in 1968 and only recently retired from racing by her present Australian owners, Windward Passage has been a champion, a milestone, a trendsetter in ocean racing and yacht design. Sailors have long taken to the high seas in search of adventure, challenge, enjoyment, satisfaction, and the thrill of competition. There are dozens of long-distance races. Few sailors would dispute that the Miami-to-Montego Bay race has the perfect elements. A popular starting point, a varied race course, and a beautiful destination. Traditionally, the Montego Bay race has started near Miami. But in recent years, the starting line for this 811-mile ocean race has been moved up the coast closer to Fort Lauderdale. In normal weather, the course is a perfect beat, reach, and run to Jamaica. From the start, the boats sail easterly to windward, passing Great Isaac Light and Great Stirrup Islands. Altering course, the fleet sails close-hauled south through the Bahamas, past Eleuthera, and past Cat Island. Then the reaching leg begins through the Crooked Passage and past a little coral called Mira Porvos, which literally translated means, "Look out for these." From here, the course proceeds to the Windward Passage between Haiti and Cuba. Once through the passage, the boats turn downwind and begin the spinnaker run in a generally westerly direction to Jamaica's Montego Bay.
So we have a built-in triangle with a land leaving and a land sighting almost involved every day. So the variety, the navigational challenge, the warm water, the nice people here and there and particularly there when you get there, I think makes one of the finest formulas for an ocean race that's available in the world today.
The second Mobay race in 1963 found Escapade anxious to repeat her 1961 victory. The wind was a little stronger, but still did not meet the expectations of those who entered. Escapade was joined in the race by arch-rival Bolero, a Sparkman and Stevens yawl of similar size that beat Escapade to the finish line. The winner on corrected time was Guinevere, designed by a young New York-based Englishman named Alan Gurney. Gurney would later team up with Robert F. Johnson in the creation of Windward Passage. In 1965, when Johnson returned to this race, it was with a fast and beautiful 72-foot Ticonderoga, an L. Francis Herreshoff designed ketch of 1936 that had already proven her speed. Although she was not designed to rate well within the handicapping system, she stood a good chance of making the best speed over the course and winning on elapsed time. Ticonderoga did far better than Johnson had hoped. With plenty of wind and the exceptionally speedy Ticonderoga, Bob Johnson broke the course record, crossing the finish line first. And to the amazement of many, the new Johnson Ticonderoga team won overall on corrected time as well. Just a few months later, Bob Johnson sailed Ticonderoga to another spectacular win, once again breaking a speed record. This was in the Trans-Pacific race of 1965. He continued on to a successful career with Big Ty, as the boat has been often called, accumulating trophies and records. Bob Johnson looked forward to using his skill and racing experience to help create a revolutionary new boat. So it was that in 1968, Windward Passage was constructed.
Bob Johnson was in the lumber business.
and so he naturally wanted to build Passage of wood. She's built of spruce, which is very unusual, and Alan Gurney says she is the second largest spruce structure that was ever built. Howard Hughes' famous spruce goose flying boat being the largest. Bob set up his own boatyard in Lucaya in the Bahamas, and he built the facility on the beach. And she was built in the shed, upside down, cold molded, and these layers of spruce and epoxy resin and fiberglass of Dynel covered. She's covered with 2 layers of Dynel. And she was built right there with the crew that Bob selected and brought in for the purpose. And when she was finished, the boatyard was dissolved and everything went away.
Passage was entered in the 1969 Mo Bay race, her first season afloat. Johnson's expectations were satisfied when the boat broke the speed record he had set with Ticonderoga in 1965. The Transpac race followed in June of '69, and Passage once again broke Big Ty's course record. The crew had reason to celebrate this new victory, or so they thought. They had been celebrating 5 days when the little yacht Esprit arrived and lodged a protest over a minor starting line foul with Passage. The protest was upheld by the race committee, which invoked a 2-hour elapsed time penalty, thus stripping Passage of this victory. Johnson took the disappointing news well, but could not understand how the speed record of Passage could be thrown out. The rules were a little different then, and Johnson and others felt the penalty should have been made on corrected time only and not applied against elapsed time. Bob Johnson vowed never to sail in the Transpac again. A short time later, he died. Windward Passage was left to the Johnson boys, Mark and Fritz. Older son Mark continued to sail aggressively in the ocean circuits. The 1971 season would once again include the Miami-to-Montego Bay race. On board this time was photographer Ted Jones.
What I wanted to do was a film that showed what it was like to sail aboard a big maxi sailboat. It's the kind of thing that not every sailor gets a chance to do. So I called Chip Cleary, who was the crewmaster for Windward Passage, and I said, this is what I'd like to do. I don't want to be a crew member. I want to just go along with the camera and record what happens. Well, Chip said, no, we really can't do it on a Bermuda race, but perhaps if you'd like to come along next winter for the SORC or the Jamaica race, we'd be happy to work things out. I said, well, gee, I've never done a Jamaica race. Let's do that. That sounds like a good idea. So it was just by chance that I happened to be aboard when Windward Passage set the course record. Mark Johnson is the skipper. He was 33 years old at the time, and he took over the command of Windward Passage after his father had died the year before. The fellow in the yellow shirt behind him is Chip Cleary, who is the executive officer. Chip was the fellow that kept all the logistics going, got the crew organized, and figured out how to do it.
The wind at the start of the 1971 race was from the south-southeast at 10 to 18 knots. This wind direction meant the fleet would not have to beat to Great Isaac Light as is normal, but could sail the first leg without tacking. There are 33 boats starting this race in the fresh breeze.
5 seconds. We're off. We got a wonderful start. Mark sailed well away from the line, but the boat's so big you can't maneuver it quickly, so we took a long shot at it, but his timing was perfect. And we found a hole between the other boats and we blasted right through. We really expected to be in the lead. The only 2 boats that could be faster than we, or as fast, were Huey Long's Ondine, which was also 73 feet, and Ted Turner's American Eagle, the converted 12-meter. We were not really concerned with the handicap prize. We thought we'd leave that to others because our function was to get to Jamaica first, to break the record if we could. The red-hulled American Eagle and the light blue-hulled Ondine were the only boats that we figured had a chance of approaching the speed that we could make. Passage just powered away from the fleet. And in a matter of an hour, the only boat that we had in sight was Undine. And she was dropping fast astern until she was hull down, just her sails visible. We were making excellent speed here, close reaching in the Gulf Stream. Our speed was consistently over 10 knots on the speedometer, 10 and a half, 11, 11 and a half. But as we got into the Gulf Stream, the current took us away from the wind, and the apparent wind became quite a bit less. So the decision was made to change from the number 2 jib top and put up a slightly larger sail, the number 1 jib topsail. As we got through the stream, the apparent wind increased again, so it was back to a slightly smaller sail, so another headsail change had to be made. Great Isaac Light, 60 miles from Miami. We had started at noon, and here it is before sundown, which meant that we had averaged well over 10 knots, which was really outstanding, much better than we expected to do. I'd raced around Isaac Light many times on races from Miami to Nassau, but I had never before been there so early as to see her in daylight, and this was my first look at this unusual island outpost in the Bahamas. All the way across the stream, our navigator, Peter Bowker, had been warning us that we were going to have to come on the wind now. And as luck would have it, as we approached Isaac, the wind came around with us, so we were again able to maintain our close reach and our very fast speed as we moved from Isaac to Great Stirrup Light and on to Eleuthera at dawn the next morning.
With the first morning's light, Windward Passage speeds on. Still screaming along without having to beat, the crew spent an alert yet comfortable night. Passage is now positioned well ahead of the fleet.
One of the hard things for an ocean racing crew to do when they're out of sight of other competition, and we could still just barely see Undine, but she was getting further and further astern all the time. But the thing that it's tough to do is to keep the boat going at its maximum potential. But this is a really good crew, and without being told, someone would go up on the bow, check the jib trim, check the mainsail trim, make sure everything was pulling to its maximum effectiveness. And that's what keeps the boat going fast. Also, many inexperienced crews will tend to slack off at night, and a really top-notch ocean racing crew like Windward Passages will keep their edge in the night and keep the flashlights going and make sure that the trim is right. And the boat is going maximum speed all the time. There's Mark on the helm in the morning as we approached Eleuthera. And the wind came around some more and we were able to ease sheets and get a mizzen staysail set. And that added to our speed another half a knot, maybe a knot. So now we're consistently going 12 and a half. And sometimes the speedometer would touch on 13. Made it a little tough to steer, too. Our navigator is Peter Bowker. Peter has been on every Jamaica race until the 1987 race, which was the first one he missed in 25 years. He's also been aboard the yacht that set the record each time, from Escapade and the very first race, Ticonderoga and Passage in 1969. Peter came on deck to take his noon sight, and when he was done, he took Mark aside and he said, "I just checked the old man's log from 1969, and we're 4 hours ahead of the record." 4 hours in the first 24 was a pretty good time. And actually, our first run was 262 miles, and that was the best run of the trip. The wind kept coming around for us, we knew that pretty soon it would be time to set the spinnaker. So the crew made sure that when we wanted up was stopped and ready to go. We sailed close down the eastern side of Cat Island, and Ondine was just a white speck on the horizon astern, and we could see that she altered course, I guess figuring that they couldn't keep up with us on the same course, so they would go to the inside of Cat Island and see if they couldn't get some advantage that we didn't have. Well, it didn't work. Sunrise the next morning found us well down through the Bahamas with the lightest air that we had encountered for the whole trip. And our speed was down to 8, sometimes a little below 8 knots. We had the light spinnaker up, and at dawn we discovered there was a slight rip in it, and with the dawn the wind started to increase. So that called for changing from the light spinnaker to the 1.5 ounces. The staysails had to be brought down. We thought it was better to take the rip spinnaker down first, to avoid damaging it further, and then set the replacement spinnaker later. At noon the second day, we were 11 hours ahead of the record. We were on our way to the Windward Passage, that famous, infamous, perhaps, body of water for which this vessel was named. And as the sun heated up today, the wind increased. And the wind came around aft some more, and we were able to set our mizzen spinnaker. With it pulling, we added another knot to our speed. Now over 13, sometimes 14. Later on, we'd see 15, 16, 17 knots. When Passage gets up to 15 knots or faster, she's almost on a planing mode. And her stern wave breaks away with a tremendous rooster tail, just like a high-speed powerboat. The crew had great respect for the late skipper. And the crew often spoke of him as if his ghost were riding along with us. His spirit surely was. If we did something especially well or had an especially good break, someone would look aloft as if Bob Johnson were perched on the spreader and throw a casual salute and gently say, "Thanks, Bob." Later in the afternoon, the wind continued to build, and it was perhaps 25 knots, maybe a little bit more in the gusts, and we were crashing before it. 15 knots, 16 knots, 17 knots, and the speed was building down toward the Windward Passage. The tip of Cuba, Point Maisi, appeared on the horizon. This was late in the afternoon. We came in very close to shore, and one of the crew members said, "Hey Pete, what happens if the gunboats come out?" And he said, "Don't worry about the gunboats, we'll outrun them." And there's the lighthouse.
From the Windward Passage, as we pass Point Maiami, then the course alters to get into the trade winds and the traditional run to Montego Bay. As we got there, the wind was building. A large dark cloud came up and threatened from the stern. We would have to jibe, perhaps jibe right in the middle of a squall. Herm Stawicki, who was our port watch captain, was my watch captain on the helm through this period, said that he had never felt Windward Passage so lively. He said she was absolutely marvelous on the helm. The jibing maneuver consists of turning the stern through the direction of the wind. And the spinnaker, which is on the port side here, must be transferred to the starboard side, and the main boom, which is on the starboard side, must come over to the port side. A prudent seaman would say, well, isn't it better to take the spinnaker down? But this is a race, and we take some risk. So the spinnaker is left up. What Passage did do was to do what's called a two-pole jibe. That is, you put the new pole on the starboard side in position, hoist it up, have everything set, jibe the boat, and then take the old pole down. It takes longer, it's a lot of work, but it does keep the sail under control, and that was important in these strenuous conditions. And on a new jibe, our speed increased even more. A little bit after this, we had two bursts that were absolutely deafening, and the speedometer went right up to the peg at 20 knots.
Later, the crew learned that the 61-foot Sorcery, many hours behind Windward Passage, sailed through a squall and was knocked flat in the water. Sorcery's mainsail was ripped, battens were snapped, and a spreader broken. Passage, however, was so fast, so far ahead of the fleet that the fast-moving ketch outran the storm looming astern. Well along on the course, Passage experiences the third sunset of the race. For her, it will be the last sunset of this race.
In the morning we were still running before the trades, but our speed now was down considerably, and we were down in the 10 or 11 knot range. And by comparison to what we'd had the evening before, it seemed like we were standing still. It was very frustrating, knowing that at any moment the wind could stop, the mast could fall over the side, and something could happen to take the record away. But the spirits of the crew were high. There wasn't much to do except to sit around and wait for the finish line to come. Peter said, "It's time to jibe. Come in, let's approach the island and head in for the finish." So again, the off-watch is rousted out. The new pole is set up in position. The guy is tripped out of the pole, and the new sheet takes the strain. The sheets are adjusted for the new jibe, and the crew sets to work cleaning things up and making everything shipshape once again. The off-watch has been fed, they've come on deck, we're all on deck waiting for the finish. Even our cook, Sandy McKenzie, has nothing more to do, and he's appeared on deck seemingly for the first time in the trip. We were teasing Peter Valker, saying, "Hey, where's this island you've been telling us about?" And he got out the binoculars and said, "It's there." An incredible sight, the beautiful green, lush island of Jamaica. The finish line is right there off that point. A sunfish came out from the beach to greet us. That was our first welcoming committee. And he turned to sail with us for a while, and for a while he was going faster. One of the guys said, "Hey, we brought the wrong boat." You couldn't have found a happier crew anywhere. And there's the finish, right off the airport. Peter went forward to take our time.
Flying the burgee of the New York Yacht Club, Windward Passage broke her own speed record by an incredible 31 hours. That record was set by Mark Johnson's father Bob just 2 years earlier. The elapsed time for the 1971 race is recorded at 3 days, 3 hours, 40 minutes, and 7 seconds. Passage's last race was in 1986. That year, she was entered in the risky Sydney-Hobart race. Today, Windward Passage sails on in Australia and belongs to Ron and Kathy Muir. They have retired the sailing champion. The boat was recently rebuilt for cruising, and the Muirs have had another maxi, Windward Passage 2, built for racing. For the person who doesn't sense an emotion toward boats, it may be hard to understand how an inanimate object of lead, wood, metal, or fiber can be such an object of love and admiration. However, for enthusiasts, there is an unmistakable emotional tie.
On the morning of January 4, 1905, a prototype was launched, and Captain Nat wrote the New York Yacht Club. By the time we got underway, there wasn't a ripple on the water, and ice had formed. With the boat moved off nicely, they should prove good sailors in light air.
It's a unique and spectacular lineup. 136 ocean cruisers all under sail, ready for the off.
Oh, I think the German boat's up there, son. That's a German boat? No, I think he's ahead of us. We'll look at him. Wait till we get to the trade wind.
I'm Walter Cronkite. The ARC, or Atlantic Rally for Cruisers, is a gathering conceived by noted maritime author and event developer Jimmy Cornell from Great Britain. With the pressure of Grand Prix racing events ruling out the more casual racer, Cornell founded the ARC as a way to bring families and the heavier and sometimes older boats into an arena of competition on the high seas. This is one of the most successful and safety-conscious races organized in the world today. So join us as 3 families sail the Atlantic with almost 200 boats in competition.
Lazy days in the sun, a cool rum punch. The chance to unwind on a paradise island. For those who can afford such delight, it's within easy reach. But much more difficult is getting there at the mercy of the sea and the winds. Last November, 200 boats, many with children on board, made a transatlantic crossing to Barbados. Among them were 3 families who kept a unique record of the 3,000-mile voyage. Las Palmas, Gran Canaria, a land of eternal spring off northwest Africa. From this Spanish colony, Columbus set out to discover the New World in 1492. Nearly 500 years later, and a modern armada's tied up ready to follow in his wake. The yachts are taking part in the Atlantic Rally for cruisers, the Ark, open to sailors young and old, and to boats big and small. But none are sponsored. Commercialism is a dirty word. This event is for the true amateur.
When we first went, they said, "Oh, you're not taking the children, are you?" And they looked at me much to say, "Well, you irresponsible mother, how could you just do this?" And I say, well, yes, I do worry, but I would be worrying whether I was on land. I mean, any responsible parent would.
We've taken, as you can see looking around the boat, a lot of reasonable precautions. We've got a boom brake so the boom doesn't whizzle across and knock someone over. We've netted the boat in all the way up the rails. At the same time, the children are never allowed on deck without someone being here.
Originally, when we thought about making the crossing, we'd planned on going at the beginning of November. And then we looked into the Ark and we thought, well, perhaps it's not such a bad idea to be in such large company. And in the end, yes, it's proved to be ideal. Even if you don't see another yacht on the crossing, it's very nice to know that there's one probably in earshot, in radio contact. So that's a very reassuring thing.
Crossing the Atlantic, even in such large numbers, carries an element of risk. Illness could strike at any time.
This one's for acne. I don't know how this got. How did you get that in there?
George and Diana Lopez from California are well equipped to deal with emergencies. They're both doctors.
Somewhere along the line, if there's 200 boats out there, somebody is going to get a thumb caught. Somebody's going to get sick. Somebody's going to get a high fever. One of the kids are going to get sick. I mean, it is a race, but if somebody's hurt, we have enough medical supplies on board. We will turn the boat around and go back. Notice I say back. Go back. Go back and come alongside and take care of the person.
Yes, George means business. For him, the Ark is a race he dearly wants to win. And one of his sails is a high-tech spinnaker used by Dennis Conner, the America's Cup skipper. George sees his main rival is the German boat moored next to him, a 72-foot cruiser racer called Inspiration.
They have it appears to me, about a 6-man crew, and they're deadly serious about winning. So it's going to be a fun ride. We're going to do our best to win the race, not just to finish the race, but to win.
November the 25th, 3 days before the main start. Yachts under 35 feet set sail for the Caribbean. Many of these smaller, slower boats can but hope and pray they reach landfall in time for Christmas. Leading the pack is the sole entry from Barbados, the 32-foot Brugger-Dung. Her racy lines and crew of 8 promise speed. It's a long way home, and she's determined to be there first to welcome the others. Back in the harbour, Admiral's Lady welcomes Lois and Frank Wheeler, the skipper's brother and sister. On Bucephalus, the Americans are joined by good friends Yanka and her husband Paul, another doctor. His first job is a free consultation.
It's like a traumatic thing, but to watch to make sure it doesn't get more red.
Buying large quantities of fresh fruit and veg from the market is one of many last-minute jobs to be done. On the eve of the big boat start, more than 100 skippers squeeze into the Ark office for a final briefing.
We have a lot of radio amateurs. So should there be an emergency, you get onto that VHF net that will be passed on until it's reached either a person who can help with advice, or until it reaches a boat that has either single sideband radio or amateur radio to broadcast to the outside world.
The reality of what lies ahead begins to hit home. No jolly regatta this. The Atlantic is a massive ocean, a hostile environment. For the next 2 or 3 weeks, they're on their own. The morning of the big race and a fair wind turns foul for a boat preparing to sail west. She's disqualified for being unseaworthy. Owners Alison Wookey and Ron Price are devastated by the news. They'd planned to get married in Barbados.
I'm sorry, I'm not going to be put in the position of being responsible for the watertight integrity of your boat. That is your skipper's sole responsibility for everybody on board.
Unable to join the others, Silver Shamrock stays moored in Las Palmas Marina. But for the competitors soon to cast off, there are feelings of excitement, apprehension, and resolution.
I think if we're not set now, we've left it a little bit too late.
We're looking forward to seeing Barbados.
We're mainly focused on the challenge between the, as I say, the boat next to us with professionals and us as amateurs. And Diana got up this morning and said we're gonna beat them.
George has a fast boat, beautifully equipped, a cruiser capable of winning the Ark. But he has only one experienced crew. The rest are enthusiastic beginners, and that includes the skipper himself.
We did sail from Gibraltar down here, and that was our longest cruise together in 4 days, and that was pretty traumatic. So, yeah, it's an all-new ball game. It's taken us into another realm.
I took a sailing course about a week before I left California. And when I signed up, they asked me, was I going to join the club or just what my plans were? And I said that, well, in 1 week I'm going sailing around the world on our own boat. And they said, you're going to do what? When? They couldn't believe it.
It's a unique and spectacular lineup. 136 ocean cruisers all under sail, ready for the off. The extra crew member on Drina, the Australian boat, is Ivan Cornell, son of Ark organizer Jimmy.
Up there, son. That's a German boat? No, I think he's ahead of us. We'll catch him. Wait till we get to the trade wind.
Everything's going to go really well and that the children aren't going to start complaining of pains here, there and everywhere after the first couple of days. And once we settle into it, I'm always all right. I'm looking forward to
it. Most boats head south in search of the trade winds, 1,000 miles to the Cape Verdes before sailing west, courtesy of the steady breezes that should blow them all the way to Barbados. But the weather cuts up rough. Day 2 of the voyage and Admiral's Lady experiences 12-foot waves and near gale-force winds from the wrong direction.
During the night the winds have freshened quite considerably. Now got about a 4/6 from the south. It's made us alter our plans slightly in that we had planned on going well down towards the Cape Verde Islands before heading west. But these winds are now forcing us out quite considerably to the west, but we are in company of half a dozen other boats.
Only Jibby on Bucephalus seems to have found his sea legs, and even he takes cover.
Last night was terrible. I went to bed at about 8 o'clock and got up at 8 o'clock this morning. And I haven't been this seasick since I don't know when.
Liz on board Drina is in no fit state to do anything.
As the sun finally sets on day 2, I think it's a day we'll probably all choose to forget once we get to Barbados, if not sooner. I think Lois, being the least experienced amongst the 4 of us, is feeling it worst. Discomfort. Tomorrow's another day. to wait and see what that brings forth.
Unfortunately, it's more of the same. Liz is back on her feet, just, but she's clearly not at her best. It's a different story on board the British boat Admiral's Lady. Samantha's content and appetites are returning.
In the Canary Islands, they tend not to remove the innards of their chickens. So David, our skipper, not only are his duties manifold, but one of them is chief chicken gutter.
After foul weather, chicken entrails could turn the strongest stomach. Yet Samantha's fascinated. And something's also caught the eye of Christopher and Nicholas. Dolphins come to keep Bucephalus company. Hilary spots a school alongside Admiral's Lady. Immediately, spirits are lifted. Even the wind has moderated. All the hardships of the past few days are forgotten as these friendly creatures escort the yachts on their way. Destination, Barbados. Day 5 of the transatlantic voyage from Gran Canaria. The weather continues unsettled and uncomfortable.
When Frank and Lois offered to help David and I across the Atlantic, naturally one of their questions was what type of clothing they should bring, how many jumpers, etc., to which David replied, shorts and t-shirts, that's all you'll need on this crossing.
We've had gusting 30-knot winds, and we've reefed this morning, but the wind's now dropped down to about 20, and we can pick up some speed if we take the reef out.
While the Australians hoist more sail to take advantage of favourable winds, the British too are making the most of the improved weather.
You can't really complain at conditions like this when you're progressing on your desired route at a fairly healthy speed. Once again, we took advantage of a good drying breeze to just get out some of the washing.
On deck, Frank gets to grips with some hand steering. Continually using the autopilot drains the boat's batteries, and these have to be recharged by running the motor. On Bucephalus, the motor's failed. It spells trouble for the Americans.
Found massive air leaks into the system. I'm not a diesel mechanic. I've been on it for about 2 hours.
Yeah, it's 6 o'clock now.
So we've lost 2 hours in the race, which to me is disaster.
Unless he can fix it, George won't be able to recharge the batteries. His autopilot, navigation aids, radio, computer, freezer, even his taps will all fail in a matter of hours.
For this, I gave her medicine. Okay. Crank her over for 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Crank her over for 10 seconds.
You really mean 5.
5 seconds.
Every time you say 10, you say stop.
Okay, go for it.
Is it gonna stay on though?
10 days at sea and its slow progress. Fluky trade winds are to blame. On Drina, Mike tunes into the ArcNet and plots the positions of other boats in the rally.
Work is done. That Barbadian boat is due in Barbados on
Friday, I believe. And the other boat, Rusty Pelican, was due in on Saturday.
Radio is normally the sole means of contact between yachts. After all, the Atlantic's a big place. But here in the middle of the ocean, Admiral's Lady bumps into another Ark competitor, Sassenach. An amazing stroke of luck. And what's more, the crew have their own camera.
This is certainly the life, isn't it?
As they get closer to us, it's worth mentioning that we are right in the middle of the Atlantic. I should think about 1,000 miles from land. Not the usual place one meets up with other boats.
Excuse me. Lost the line.
While in conversation with Sassenach, it appears their stocks are lasting pretty well. Except that they've run out of not only cigarettes but beer. So in return for a few fillet steaks, which they've got, as they put out, the guests didn't turn up the previous night. So they've got the few extra fillet steaks, they're swapping them. So fair exchange is no robbery.
Well done. The beer. And we've got to put it somewhere.
It's not a bad shop out here. Beer, the lot.
Drop them down there. Behind. Like a foot. Sounds very mean to see. Okay. Thanks very much. Well done. Good luck. See you, Mommy. See you. Bye-bye. We look forward to that.
But all is doom and gloom on Bucephalus, 400 miles ahead. Hit by a violent squall, George checks out the damage.
We took a knockdown. The wind speed went up to 60 when I was down below a little while ago. The boat heeled over about 45 degrees. The boom went underwater, halfway submerged. I thought we were going to lose the boom. My only consideration was trying to save the boom because I knew the spinnaker pole was gone. I think that we've lost the race. I don't want to tell the kids about it. I don't want to tell Diana, but it's be virtually impossible for us to win the race. We're not going to give up, but I don't think we can win. I felt like crying when I saw the pole, and I knew I couldn't repair it. We'll just do our best to keep the speed above 10 knots and push the boat as hard as we can. I guess I'm just sick. I'm just sick to death that we don't have a pole.
So now it's American true grit versus German inspiration. No contest. The sleek cruiser racer's already a full day's sail nearer the finish line. Her experienced crew, the big difference between the two boats. George never really stood a chance.
No, she's got it, Tom.
But not everyone's in a hurry. When the wind drops and the sun shines, it's playtime on Drina. Although a flat calm's frustrating, the Australians make the most of it. The British enjoy a dip too. A 1,000 miles away in Barbados, Brugadung arrives home after nearly 17 days at sea. Being the only Barbadian yacht in the Ark, every crew member's a local hero. Brugadung was beaten to the line by an American trimaran in record time. She took just under 13 days. Unlike most of the others, Rusty Pelican had no trouble finding the wind.
Yeah, we went all the way out, set up the spinnaker, and we kept the spinnaker up for the 10 days of the whole race. The first 2 days was beating the weather, but after that it was a rundown, day and night.
Third across the line is the biggest boat in the fleet, a magnificent schooner aptly named Gloria, 124 feet of pure luxury. The rigours of a transatlantic crossing are alien to the millionaire skipper of this beauty.
We live very well on board here, and one of the biggest problems every day is to choose the day's movie, actually. That's a lot of discussions every morning.
Dawn on day 17. Drina and Admiral's Lady have 400 miles or more of open ocean to go. But Bucephalus has completed her voyage. She's approaching the finishing line.
Yeah, Bucephalus, ARC control, do you copy? Yes, we will take your time as soon as you cross the line, and then I'll give you further berthing instructions. Welcome to Barbados. Over.
The Americans have taken 16 days, 21 hours, 1 minute.
George, welcome to Barbados. Thank you. Have you enjoyed the voyage? Huh? Have you enjoyed the voyage? Can you ask me tomorrow?
Up goes the cruising chute on Drina. A whisper of a wind has become a steady breeze. It's the perfect Christmas gift. Yachts can now crack on at speed towards the Paradise Island.
Happy Christmas, Grandpa.
We'll ring you from Barbados.
We'll ring you from Barbados. Oh, Happy Christmas.
You want to say Happy Christmas too?
Happy Christmas.
Christian wants to say Happy Christmas too.
Shortly after midnight on December the 19th, Drina slips into Barbados. The voyage has lasted nearly 21 days. Admiral's Lady's just a few hours behind.
This is Yacht Control. Come in, please. Over.
Admiral's Lady to Yacht Control.
Good morning, sir. You are the 61st boat to cross the line. Welcome to Barbados. I trust you had a pleasant trip. Do you understand the directions to proceed to the shallow draft, or do you require assistance? Over.
No, we're familiar with the procedures for the shallow draft.
Thank you very much, sir, and congratulations.
Thank you.
We had a good trip. We could have had some more wind. We never found the trades.
You're a bit of an old hand of travelling the oceans, Mike, but what's it like to be in Barbados?
It's very hot here. It's very nice to be here and have a good night's sleep.
I wasn't convinced it was Barbados.
She's always had trust in me.
I wanted confirmation. However, when they greeted us as we came over the line and welcomed us to Barbados, yeah, it was great. Yes, it was. It was fantastic.
But a navigational error has tragic consequences. Matchwood is all that's left of the Canadian yacht Bamaka, washed up on the beautiful yet rugged east coast of the island. Jagged, dangerous cliffs take the full force of Atlantic rollers, and half a mile out are notorious reefs which can shred an unwary boat.
So obviously we were too close inshore, and next thing we knew we were bumping on the reef, and then everything happened very quickly. The boat foundered and sank.
Of the 200 cruisers which left Gran Canaria, only one, Bamaka, was lost. Everybody else arrives safe and sound, ready to sample the delights of Barbados.
They have enjoyed it very much, and a lot of them have come to me and said, this is the right spirit, please keep it up. Make sure that it's not going to change, that it's not going to become yet another ocean race where people only enter for their own vanity, for their own glory, but for the fun of it.
Just a reminder that Sperry topsiders have been keeping feet firmly on deck since 1935.
Mystic Seaport has a number of video cassettes for use at home, in clubs and organizations, or schools. Call 1-800-445-9236.